Cool. Well, hi, everybody. This is Magos, your friendly neighborhood tech priest, back with some more information on OpenSense, a continuation of my series that will be ongoing. Today will be pretty brief. We're just going to be going over how to set up a VPN gateway within OpenSense so that all of your traffic that is going outbound, so outside of your local network, is routed through that VPN. So that way your ISP or any other prying eyes can't be looking at what you're doing. The VPN provider I'm going to be using today is Proton VPN. Them and Molvad are my two favorite personal VPN providers. And we'll just get started. So within your OpenSense dashboard, the first thing that you're going to want to do is go down to System and select Trust and select Authorities. So once you get your VPN information, login, etc., normally what will happen is they will give you a OVPN certificate. And if you open that inside of a text editor, you'll get something that looks like this, that has a whole bunch of certificate information, TLS keys, etc., all of your server addresses and configuration information. And what we're going to do is we're going to be inserting this into OpenSense so that it knows where to go.
Hey, Magus.
And go ahead.
Sorry. Is there a way you can make the Ubuntu, like the resolution on the Ubuntu stuff a little bit bigger? It's just a little hard to read the words.
Yeah, sure.
Or just maybe make the browser just like zoom in on the browser page.
Yep, working, doing it now. Better?
Yeah, better. Thank you.
No worries. So the first thing that we want to do within OpenSense is go in and set up the certificate authority for our selected VPN. And we do that by going down to System, Trust, and Authorities and clicking this plus button. We are going to give it whatever name we'd like to. In this case, Proton VPN. And from that OVPN data, we're going to just select our entire CA information, copy, and paste. Save. Once we're done with that, the next thing we want to do is establish our client within OpenSense. And we do that by going down to VPNs, OpenVPNs, and clients. From here, we get to set up a whole bunch of fun configuration information. Starting with, we're going to add, give it whatever description we like to. Now, depending upon your particular selections or what your VPN provider gives you will determine a lot of what goes in here. So, for instance, this particular one is for a TCP connection. So we're going to select TCP4 because it's based on IPv4. It'll be in a tunnel mode. Our interface that we're going to be using is going to be our WAN interface. We're going to start adding our host information, which again is inside of this certificate. The way that Proton VPN works is a lot of their servers use the same IP, but it's different ports that you access them by to determine sort of what your exit node is going to be. In this instance, we want to select that it chooses whatever one of these it wants to at random, and then I want it to infinitely resolve the remote server, so it'll keep attempting to contact it. Scrolling down. Okay, so this part I'm not going to show on screen, but it requires you to enter a username and password. So I have my information. You can see my username that I use is obscene. And my password, which you won't be able to see, is even more obscene than that. Scrolling down, Proton VPN utilizes TLS authentication, but it will not be automatically generated. We're going to enter that information, the shared key information, off of what it gives us inside of our OVPN certificate. So again, it's a simple copy and paste procedure. Doesn't require, it's not going to require a client certificate because we input a username and password. This is deprecated, but I'm going to enter it because it is shown within the certificate. It uses AES 256 GCM as its encryption algorithm, and the digest algorithm is SHA-512. This stuff we really don't need to worry about at all. Roll down. Now here is some fun stuff. Within a lot of these certificates, you're going to see some tunnel information that needs to be added. And you'll see it here. Essentially, all of these things need to be copied and pasted into here. And it'll be defined again by your particular service provider.
Got a question for you.
Send it.
Is this OpenVPN based tunneling, or is it WireGuard or something else?
So this currently is OpenVPN. I do have a class I'm developing on WireGuard that'll be coming in the future. And tied into that will also be failover. So if one goes down, the other picks it up. But that's a future class that I'm prepping for you guys.
So that file, your text file, is that a .ovpn file?
Precisely. Yes, correct.
Is there a way to just simply import that OVPN file?
So if we were going to be using this, like let's say on a client machine, right? You have the like a OVPN, like on Windows, you had OpenVPN that you could just upload the OVPN file to. Or if you were going to use Linux and, OpenVPN reference this OVPN certificate, it would work fine. The problem is within the simple answer is no, but within the firewall, there's no means to have it spit out this data into the appropriate fields because it's not a common use case to have an entire network go through a VPN tunnel just because of bandwidth limitations. I'm not saying it's not done, but certainly less common than an individual endpoint doing it. So there's no real way, either in OpenSense or in PFSense, to just go, here, use this, and it goes and works. You have to do it all manually.
That's because I bring it up because I do have PFSense.
Yeah.
Whatever this is, OPNsense, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's kind of based from a similar code base, I guess. And so I've already done this in PFSense, but
Right.
with MoLDAT, and they give you like a big long installation document. Pretty much you have to kind of copy paste exactly what you're doing here. So I was wondering if OPNsense had the ability to import the OVPN.
Yeah, no, and it does not. And I think that would actually be a really cool tool to use. The problem is that within a firewall or like any endpoint device, like because we're using OpenSense in this capacity both as our firewall and as our edge router, right? You're creating a gateway. It's that bridge, that router bridge from your LAN network to the WAN network that operates differently than a simple client saying, hey, route my traffic this way. I'm actually grasping beyond my knowledge. It just works differently. Yep. So back to here, we're going to set our verbosity level to 3 because that's what's recommended, and save. Now we can go here to our connection status and see that it is indeed connected. Now we're going to go over to our interfaces, and here's where it gets different, Wearlock, is because it's essentially it's an interface. You're creating a gateway, and that's a separation between like an endpoint device and a router. And that's why I think that it does all of this stupid stuff, is because you have to define traffic paths. Assignments. You're going to see that the OpenVPN client has already been here, entered here automatically. We're going to add the plus sign here. We can change this. We want to enable it. Let's call it Proton VPN. Have it block bogons, and we really don't need to mess with any of the rest of this. Apply changes. And finally, we're going to establish our outbound NAT rules. Go here, change it to hybrid, save, apply, add rule. To be interface Proton VPN, and save, apply. And now all of our traffic is routed through Proton VPN. And I can prove that to you. Let's go ahead. First of all, disable this. So now we're no longer connected. We'll do correlate.me. I could type. That's our current IP address. Let this turn on. Says it's connected. And now we're at a completely different IP address. And there you have it. Straightforward and simple. A little bit of copying and pasting, clicking a couple of the right boxes, and you're good to go. All of my traffic is now being routed outside through a VPN. Any computer that then connects to this system will go through that tunnel.
So I got another question for you.
Go for it.
So what happens when the VPN tunnel dies? Because I use a very similar setup with OPNsense, and you're using OpenVPN client, and you're communicating with your favorite VPN provider, but that's just a client connection, right? So if that drops, do you have anything configured?
Right. Yes. So there's a couple of ways that you could do that, and that will go into. I'll go into this more in depth in my next class when we set up high availability. But if you go into your gateways, you'll see that you have both a standard WAN gateway and the Proton VPN gateways for IPv4 and IPv6. If you look at your priorities right here, currently WAN is higher or is lower than Proton VPN, which means it has a higher priority. There's a couple of things that you could do. Right now, if the VPN were to go down, it would just automatically go over to WAN. If you wanted to, you could outright disable those gateways. And so that if you lose your VPN connection, you would have no other access to the internet. The other way you can do it is by setting up gateway groups and setting up failover and have multiple VPN servers and or providers, which is what I do on my home system, and set up firewall rules for all of that. But that's a little bit more in depth than I wanted to go into tonight.
All right, I got a question.
Shoot.
So I see that you're in VMware Workstation. I see that
Yeah.
you have OpenSense as a VM and Ubuntu as a VM. And I forget, if you could remind me again how the relationship works between this system and your actual like home router, right?
Okay, so that's the things that I was setting up prior to getting started here. So when we originally set up our OpenSense, we set it up so that it would be a bridged adapter. So coming out right now, I have my main home OpenSense firewall / router going out to a VPN location, right?
Mhm.
I didn't want to broadcast that here. So what I did is on my client computer that I'm using right now, I set up Proton VPN down here on the client itself to go to Phoenix, Arizona. And then I change this from bridge to NAT so that its main IP that it would pick up would be that VPN from this client. So that's the way I have literally tunnels within tunnels going on right now. There's a primary VPN tunnel going out from my home. My client is sending a tunnel to a different VPN server from within that tunnel. And this is now sending out yet another VPN tunnel from within that. That's how it's set up currently.
And there's another consideration in that if you have a firewall device that's protecting your whole LAN, I guess, that it's a good idea to have it as a physically separate device because you can virtualize it and it's good for a demo. But for practical purposes, it's a good idea to not run it as a VM because the idea of hypervisors and jailbreaking it just decreases the attack surface.
Correct. So the way that my network is set up is, you remember we talked about the Hive Zeus a couple weeks ago, Wearlock? I use one of those specifically running only OpenSense as my edge device. It's not virtualized.
Right on.
When you got
Any other questions?
Well, when you have time, Magos, could you post that hardware of your OpenSense in the text? I'd like to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I sure can. And as a matter of fact, I will drop with guidance from Sean Sinak. I have created ye olde first GitHub repository that are all of these instructions with nice shiny pictures that I'll post as well.
Awesome.
And there's another sort of use case that I've come up against where if you've got some sensitive service, maybe like banking, and they trip out on they do geo blocking, and they're like, we don't like your VPN IP address.
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that. Like, I could from here, I could go to even Google, and it'll probably ask me for a reCAPTCHA. Just because it's like, hey, what are you doing? Yeah, see. So there. Go ahead.
So that's what I'm saying is like once you have this all set up, and it's a nice, comfortable capturing of everything you're sending out, right? So you have wireless, Wi-Fi, all your devices, great, right? All under one license provider, which is good because you have to typically give them multiple seats, four. So then, but yeah, with the idea, once you got this in place, if you did need to bypass that, have you come up against that? What strategy do you use for an exception? Where you're like, okay, this stupid bank is like not going to deal with me.
Don't use that service.
You don't have any kind of a VPN bypass sort of setup at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you can set it up with VLANs being routed through the firewall and other VLANs not running through it. You can set it up so that you specify specific hosts that utilize this particular NAT gateway, and that's all set up with your firewall rules. So I'll just give you an example of that. So like, let's say we have our just generic LAN firewall rules within OpenSense. Let's say I could create a new rule, but we'll just use a LAN net as an example because it's everything. I could tell this, right, to use this gateway and save. And so no matter what, even if this, like this is another example, if that VPN provider went down, if I had defined it to use only that gateway within the firewall rules, I would just have no internet as opposed to failover. And you can do that with different hosts using different gateways, etc.
I do apologize if there's questions in my head.
Oh, you're fine.
But just throwing these questions on the table.
Yeah. So, this is kind of something that I threw together because we needed more talkers for this Tuesday, which is why it was so brief. But please, I am more than happy to answer questions, because I think OpenSense is awesome and I want more people to use it. and B, because I'm sure there will be questions that I don't know the answers to. And that'll make me go hunting for more information, which is what I love doing. Yep.
I'll make a quick plug too. If anybody is on PFSense and wants to do the same thing, let me know, and I can show how to do the same thing on PFSense.
So, any more questions?
I have a question.
Go for it.
This might have been answered in your first part, which sorry if I missed that one. What hardware do you need for Open?
So okay, it really is variable. You can use if you have a run-of-the-mill Soho router that will accept being flashed with OpenSense, it'll work. Some of the best small standalone devices that I like to use are a device called a Protectly, and I can drop a link in there. It has a little bit more horsepower in it than your typical Soho router.
Okay. So
It
definitely
really
need
it's you can run it in a VM, but it's really scalable depending upon how many of the tools in OpenSense you want to use. So this can handle stateful packet inspection. And if you go into that depth of firewall, of ensuring you're not transmitting data, DLP type stuff with stateful packet inspection, you're going to need significantly more hardware overhead than if you don't. So it scales to your requirements.
Okay. I have an interesting, I was in Indonesia in February, and I was at a international school, and can't for the life of me remember how I ended up meeting the director of IT there. I think somebody knew what I did. Oh, I remember. My brother-in-law introduced me. That's why. Duh. Why would anybody know that over there? And we got to talking, and he asked me, "Do you know of anything that can possibly provide network filtering and for free, open source?" I mentioned PFSense, and then I remember, just at the time I had read something about OpenSense. And the guy looked into it. I don't actually know if he ever set it up, but sure enough, overseas, people are looking for this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll say when I worked overseas, I set up at the time it was PFSense because OpenSense was like barely a thing. But it's really popular overseas because of the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free. Another thing too, towards that question you had about hardware is one thing I recommend and what I do personally is I go on eBay and I pick up like old Dell Optiplex desktop systems like towers. Get them for about $80, and they have like an i5 in them. Usually have about 4 gigs of RAM. That's honestly like all you really need. And with that, you can, you got PCI Express ports in there, so you could do multiple network interfaces. You could do, 10 gig if you wanted to. You could do packet inspection because of the CPU speed is so good, and even 4 gigs of RAM is way plenty enough memory for keeping track of states and stuff like that within the router. So yeah, you can almost do this. You can almost do it with any hardware for the most part.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe not a Raspberry Pi, but something that's a little bit beefier. You can totally do it. I think OpenSense and PFSense are only supported on x86 hardware.
So as a point of reference for everyone, if you're ever looking for any system that's handling numbers of events per second, such as like standby firewalls or for like syslog servers and stuff like that, a good bet is 4 cores and 8 gigs of RAM can handle about 8,500 events per second.
yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you speak a little bit also to OpenSense versus PFSense in terms of like there's the supposedly upcoming, it's probably going to be a requirement for AES-NI for I guess it's for acceleration.
Okay, so you're getting a little bit drowned out by the background there. I caught the differences between OpenSense and PFSense, but in relation to what?
AES-NI. I believe it's like for encryption acceleration.
Okay, so it's like a hardware encryption accelerator?
Yeah, like if you have hardware that's capable of doing that, that's a little bit more suitable for. I know for PFSense, but I'm not sure about OpenSense.
Yeah, it's you just come across a question that I don't have any information about. I will definitely look into that.
Yeah, I'll mention that. That's what Wearlock's talking about is Intel CPUs have and I think AMD as well has a feature called AES-NI. I think it stands for AES New Instruction Set. And what it does is it pretty much allows a more efficient way to do AES encryption. So it's using a special like subsystem within the processor to do it,
Okay.
which I'm nearly 100% sure that OpenSense has that functionality.
Yes, so I have the answer for this. As of release 22.1.2 of OpenSense, which is a couple of releases ago, it automatically uses it if it detects it on the hardware.
Perfect. Yeah, and that pretty much allows you to have a more when you're doing encryption. Example like OpenVPN or maybe in WireGuard, and you're using AES encryption. The amount of CPU cycles that are required for that are taken down to like single digit percentages compared to if you had that disabled.
Yeah, I got another sort of issue that I guess I've seen come up is detection and mitigation of leaks. Because you set up your thing, you're depending on it, you think it's cool, it's probably not leaking anything, but then maybe you have the presence outside the firewall, I don't know, to kind of detect, oh, look at this, some of my DNS is actually leaking to my ISP.
Yep.
You might not have
Yeah.
known that. So any strategies that you've personally
100%. So speaking of DNS specifically, the way we have it set it up currently, I still have DNS leaks, right? And it'll show that I'm using Cloudflare as my DNS provider. I don't care that Cloudflare knows where I'm going because it's Cloudflare, but you can always change that by redefining who you utilize as your DNS provider. So if your VPN provider utilizes DNS, has a specific DNS address, I think off memory, Proton VPNs is 10.8.0.1. You can define it there specifically. Alternatively, if you leave it blank and allow it to be overridden, it should, depending on your provider, again, if they have a DNS if they provide a DNS service themselves, pick up that DNS and use it. So you wouldn't have outbound DNS leaks.
Do you have any strategies you might have sort of deployed for I'm not doing like an acid test of like, okay, I've set this thing up, it's my, I have a certain expectation, I think I've set everything up correctly, but then for sure, like, is this thing actually leaking anything? Like, it should only be sending out VPN traffic. What's your expectation? To kind of validate that.
I am not aware of any easy to use, like, the normal stuff of like, hey, what is my IP? Or ident.me that I was curling earlier. Outside of that, personally, I don't know of any open source way to check that. Does anybody else?
I couldn't understand Warlock at all. What was he asking?
So he said that we have this awesome VPN set up. Cool. Is there any sort of acid test way that we can ensure that our traffic is going through that VPN and not leaking anywhere else?
I mean, I believe doesn't OpenSense have Wireshark built into it, so you could do a packet inspection and check that way. You can also do an external like monitor of the traffic as well too. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I don't think of really an easy way to go about doing it as opposed to like, as you said, putting a device outside your edge device and looking at all the packets.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a general approach like that. I just wanted to know if you had run up against that with strategies or tools or approaches you know,
Yeah.
to kind of black boxes thing and say, well, I have an expectation that it's doing what I set it up to do. I might have misconfigured it, right? But the real proof of it would be to just okay, I've got this firewall, it's doing what it says it's doing, and just like Sam was saying, some sort of external monitoring of it, maybe just one time, 2 times thing, so you at least get an assurance that this thing is doing exactly what you thought it was supposed to.
Yeah, the only way that I would think of is what, Sean had mentioned of literally putting a device outside of it and inspecting all the traffic coming out of that particular NIC. Which you could do if you, yeah.
Hey, Warlock, if you could move, if you're going to talk, you might want to move somewhere because I don't know how many people can hear you. I understand a word you're saying.
That's tough. Yeah, don't know what he said. More like, but hey, real quick, Magos,
Mhm.
I noticed you used a Proton VPN.
Yep.
Is that using the free version of it?
So the free version you definitely could use. The instructions will be identical. I am not using the free version.
Okay, and so I noticed you were using I think a different VPN, right? Any preference? Why?
So the other one, it's my two favorite are going to be Proton VPN and Molvad. Wearlock could probably chime in with about 8 more. But I like Molvad because it's out of Sweden, which has very strict privacy laws. And you can do things like send them cash in an envelope to pay for your VPN if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then Proton VPN I use because it's Swiss and their philosophy of doing things is stricter than Swiss banking laws.
Cool. So on the Molvad VPN, I used to look at that, and I used to be able to get some DNS blocking stuff for like ads and whatnot.
Mhm.
But since they came out with like a browser, I can't seem to. I went to their GitHub page where they had like the ad blocking IP address, and it no
Mhm.
longer works. Is that still a thing?
Uh, Honestly, I could not tell you. I will show you this piece of interesting device or interesting information. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you.
Okay.
So if you happen to use Proton VPN, if I were to have changed my password to add, or not my password, but my username to add these identifier, you can see that it enables their malware filtering, their ad blocking, their NAT, etc. And it's baked right into their service provision.
Aha. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Mhm.
bring up something too. What Jesse mentioned too is that I know Molvad has a DNS over TLS and a DNS over HTTPS. It's one or the other
Mhm.
option, and that if you did use that as your secure encrypted like anonymous DNS solution, they do have a ad blocking version that's free. Um, so some food for thought. I'll link over to that right now.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm interested in that ad block.
Build a pie hole. Just kidding.
I
Use
did
Brave.
that and everything broke.
Yeah.
Just use Brave.
Oh, on Windows? Nah.
Oh, so I'm glad to know. Sean, I know you posted the Molvad browser. I know I've been playing with a little bit. Have you? What are your thoughts on it?
I haven't played with it yet, but I think it's looking at it and reading about it, it looks like it's pretty much like more like hardcore on the privacy side of things.
Mhm.
So I kind of put it like if you're gonna use Tor, it's like they mentioned, it's like the Tor browser. It's kind of like there's a lot of shared code between the way um, the Tor browser is and the Molvad browser. And if you're trying to be extremely anonymous on the internet, but you can't use Tor, and say you're trying to go to sites that just Tor doesn't support, or don't have, or just don't, maybe they block Tor or things like that. I think the Molvad browser is a really good solution because it implements a lot of the other privacy features that the Tor browser has. So that's what I kind of see a use for it.
Yeah.
I'll link to that too if anybody's curious what the Molvad browser is. Is anybody using it at all?
Nope.
Cost money.
Yeah, I have.
Any neat things about it, Magos?
It's essentially modified Firefox.
Okay.
And a lot of the modifications that are baked into it are like a lot of the normal stuff I do to Firefox anyway, so it just saves me steps.
Okay. And it's much faster than Tor browser, right?
Significantly, yeah. Because it's not going over Tor, so that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, that really wraps it up for my presentation. I guess I could stop this recording.
Cool. Thanks, Vegas.
Yeah.
Good talk.
Yeah, awesome.